The following is a Productions original series.
Hello and welcome to Walk and Roll Live. I'm Doug Vincent along with Eric Aguilar. I am a polio survivor, crutch and brace user. I'll throw that in for years, and transitioned into a wheelchair user over the last 20 years. How about you, Eric?
Happy Taco Tuesday, guys. I'm Eric Aguilar. I have cerebral palsy. I'm hard of hearing in my left ear, and I'm a walking stick user. What's going on with you this morning, Doc?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Eddie Ramirez, our guest from last week, for joining us, sharing his story with us. That was awesome, and touched a lot of people. Got a lot of downloads and listeners on that one. So, and you know, while I think about it, and I may have mentioned this last week, but I'm gonna mention it again. As I kind of did a bit of a deep dive, and it's a long, ugly story, but I had a couple of YouTube channels and where I published the episodes of Walk and Roll Live. It was putting it on one of the YouTube channels before I made a Walk and Roll Live YouTube channel. So I moved them all from there onto Walk and Roll Live. So if there's any of the older episodes, beginning episodes in the first couple 3 months, they are on the current YouTube channel. If you go there, there's some new episodes if you want to check them out. So that's that. And last week I was talking about the car show that I went to and got the second place accessible van trophy for, and I wasn't quite sure of the name, so I had to get the name. Somebody, and she knows who she is, straightened me out. So it's a Senior and Disabled Fund, SDF, that was the sponsor. They raised money to provide supplemental income or resources to older adults and people with disabilities for things that they might need, like maybe a microwave or a refrigerator, things like that. They have a limit on what they can spend, but any little bit helps, right? And they can also help with utility bills, also things like that. Rolling Start partners with them to help their consumers. So we had a good time at the car show. And then also this past weekend went to the WCMX Skateboard Regionals. Have you heard of WCMX, Eric?
Sounds cool though.
It's very cool. It's an organization that WC is wheelchair and MX is motocross, but it's kind of an umbrella for a bunch of different events. Well, this one was a skateboard event, and yes, there were people in wheelchair skateboarding, but there were many other disabilities that were also skateboarding. There were, youngsters, young adults, older adults. There were people that were skateboarding, in a skateboard park in Fontana, California. And this was a USA regional qualifier. And I think these folks that won this went on to another event that's coming up. And that's also on YouTube. I took some video. Please forgive me. I'm not a videographer, and the video isn't the greatest in the world, but put a little music behind that, and that's up on YouTube too at Walk and Roll Live on YouTube. So yeah, but it was a great event. It just wow to see. You'll see if you go and check out. I mean, I can't explain it. You have to see it for yourself. So go to the YouTube channel and you'll get a feel for what these skateboarders are doing. On crutches and wheelchairs and you name it, man. They're just flying through the bowls and the rails, and I'm learning a whole new lingo. So that was it. How was your week? Did you have a good week?
Yeah, cool. Me and my girl, we went to the 66er Stadium for a $2 Tuesday night. It was pretty cool. We got to see some good old youngsters play baseball. Bernie was there. And then the one thing I recommend when you go to the 66er Stadium, rather than just the drinks, is the street tacos. They have good street tacos.
So you went with a taco rather than a dog?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like I'm not crazy about hot dogs, but whenever I go see a baseball game, I always have to have a hot dog. That's just my thing.
And the dogs there are just tiny.
Oh, they're tiny. So you needed something a little more substantial. Went with the tacos.
Yeah. And then I got to go to 66ers again last Saturday with the local disaster program that I used to work with. The friend that's called the Community Emergency Response Team, known as CERT. And it was pretty neat. I got to see not only another game, but I got to see a Hall of Famer named Steve-O get inducted, during the game. Got to catch up with some old buddies from the Disaster Preparedness Agency. It was like a reunion.
Yeah, absolutely. Catching up on some baseball. You got any more planned coming up?
I'm thinking of doing the $2 Tuesday at 66ers as a regular thing,
Yeah, it's $2?
Every Tuesday night.
Shh. Hey, you can't beat that. Very nice. All right, well, let us know if you go back and tell us all about it. So, what's time for?
Letters.
We get letters. We get letters. Oh, so many letters. And it's time to share them with you.
All right, here we go. You know what we're going to do? We're going to spin for the letter of the week this week. All right. Let's see who we have. I think we have a recording that we're going to share with you. All right. You ready?
Dear Doug and Eric, greetings from Bentonville, Arkansas. This is Pete LaRue. I recently stumbled upon Walk and Roll Live and have been binge listening ever since. Your banter, wit, and the way you tackle life's ups and downs have made me a devoted listener as someone who also navigates life on wheels or with a trusty stick. I'm all ears for any life hacks you two might have up your sleeves. Doug, as the master of all things wheelchair, and Eric, with your walking stick wizardry, I'm sure you both have some secret tips to make daily life a bit smoother. Maybe a trick for speeding through grocery store lines, or a way to make elevators appear faster. That's my service dog, Daisy. She is letting me know that someone is at my door. Good girl. If you two could share some of your top-notch life hacks in an upcoming episode, or even just reply to this email, I'd be eternally grateful and possibly less likely to knock over my coffee table again. Thanks for the laughs, the insights, and for making disability not just manageable, but downright entertaining. Roll on and stick with it. Cheers, Pete LaRue and Daisy.
Well, that was very nice, huh?
I like this dude.
So I'll let you go first. Anything that jumps out?
Oh man, I like the way he was admiring our abilities and calling us masters. I mean, I ain't never been called that before. And I would love to have him as a guest, him and his dog, Daisy.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. So, I can't think of any tips right now, that I could give. I think just a kind of overarching and all-encompassing, is just try different things. And I think as our guest today would probably tell you, because he's an ambassador for an organization that we've had on here, and the Triumph Foundation, is that get involved with other disabled folks and just observe what they do, ask questions. There are people that have been doing this a long time, and you'll learn as you kind of watch them and pick up some little tricks here and there, but no big one that I think I would share right off the top, because a lot of times, and we've again talked about it so many times on this show, is that we're all different, and what might work for me may not work for you, but you can learn by observing and all of that. So that's all I got. But man, he gave props to the stick.
Oh yeah,
right.
I love that thing. Good old Lucille.
Yeah, good old Lucille. All right. Well, let's take a break. Coming up today, we've got an interview with Luis Outomuro. Am I saying that right? Help me out.
You said it just right. Is
that good? All right. And he is, among other things, he's an ambassador with the Triumph Foundation, and so much more, though. So we'll learn all about him, what his injuries were. A little different with him. At least I thought it was different. He is more ambulatory, and we'll hear all about why that is possible and all that. But first, let's get a word from our friends at Aguiar Professional Training.
Introducing Aguiar Professional Training, where we believe your greatest asset is your team. Investing in their development, knowledge, and happiness is crucial for the success and growth of your business. To reach new heights, you need to hire smart, talented individuals and empower them to work in their areas of strength and passion. At Ugyar Professional Training, we're dedicated to helping your employees become happier, more productive, and fulfilled, because when your team thrives, your business thrives. We can help your workplace work better. We offer customized workshops and one-on-one coaching to help teams and leaders build trust and have better communication. We also offer strategic planning sessions, among other services. Elevate your team with Ugyar Professional Training.
You're listening to Walk and Roll Live Disability Stories.
Yes, you're listening to Walk and Roll Live. I'm Doug Vincent. Eric Aguilar is here, and our guest is here. Let's start by meeting him.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luis Outomuro. I am an ambassador with the Triumph Foundation and also a member of the Live to Roll, Rolling Over the Hill program with Bobby Rohan and Robert, and we do the regular show there every other week or so. Been a L3, L4 incomplete for 44 years. My accident was an industrial accident. I got hurt at work, and I was ejected from an oil rig up in North Dakota. So it was quite the fall, so to speak. Bet. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely get into more detail about that. Thank you very much for joining us on Walk and Roll Live. We've been chasing you for a while. I met Louise at the event over in Burbank. You were helping out Triumph, obviously, and Live to Roll, Sean, and I don't think Bobby or Tom Conaway were there, who we had on a couple of weeks ago, but had the pleasure of meeting several people. Louise won, and at that point, I started saying, "Hey, you need to come on our show." And he's yes, but I had to chase it for a while. But yeah, he's always open to it. So we appreciate you being here. So, well, as we do with all of our guests, we like to kind of get a little idea of who you were pre-injury. So tell us a little bit about where you're from and what it was like growing up.
Well, basically, I was a typical LA kid. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. And later, towards the end of high school, decided to make a change in my life and go live with my father and my stepmother up in Washington State, and lived a pretty normal life, worked a couple of jobs and all that. And then Mount St. Helens happened. The volcano in Washington State erupted, and that completely changed the economy. So I had left Washington State while the volcano was going off, and I moved to North Dakota to go work in the oil rigs. Work on the oil rigs out in the oil fields. It was either like, working logging, which is Washington State and Oregon, and you work certain types of jobs to make good money up there. You work for Boeing, you work for Weyerhaeuser out in the woods, different things like that. That seemed to be coming at the end of the time because of the eruption of the volcano, Mount St. Helens. And I thought, well, I either need to join the service or go work in the oil fields. And that was the dilemma, which division of going in the service do I consider, which I considered the Marines because no one in our family had been in the Marines before. So
what age are you at this point?
Beg your pardon?
What age are you at this point?
At this point, I was 19 years old.
Okay.
So, or 18.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it's either the Marines or go work in the oil fields. And after a lot of deliberation, I decided to go to the work in the oil fields, which was at the time in North Dakota. So I packed my butt up, and me and a friend, we went out and got jobs working in the oil fields. and I had become a derrick hand, which is the guy that works up in the tower of the oil rig. So I work on a platform 2/3 of the way up the tower. The tower is 98 feet tall, and I worked at the 65-foot level. And that day, I happened to be, when it was cold, it was minus 30 below.
Oh, yeah.
With the wind chill factor, it was minus 70 below. When it was snowing, it was like 30, 25 degrees. It was wonderful. It felt good.
It felt warm almost.
Yeah, it was almost warm. But at 30 degrees, it's terrible. You don't feel much of anything.
Yeah.
And after lunch, it was time to go back to work. So I climbed aboard the equipment that would take me up to the tubing board, which is a platform on a rig where they lean the pipe into the rig.
Okay.
And you will see pictures or video of equipment like that. And the derrick hand, once they get to the tubing board, they have to step off onto the tubing board and lock themselves in with the cable. Well, the block and tackle is supposed to go through the tubing board. And in this case, because of the wind, the block and tackle hit the tubing board. And when it hit like that, I was ejected literally out of the oil rig. So I went up in the air about 100 feet up. I could see the top of the rig.
Wow.
It was about 5 or 6 feet away out of my reach. And then I went out 50 feet away from the oil rig. So I didn't drop straight. If I had dropped straight down, I would have died on top of all the equipment.
Yeah.
So being ejected away from the equipment actually helped. But it was a long fall.
Yeah.
And
so you're talking probably, if you saw the top of the rig, you're falling nearly 100 feet.
Right? Exactly, right at 100 feet. Because the top of the rig is 98 feet. And I'm looking at it from just a couple of feet away, just out of arm's reach.
Yeah. So at that point, Luis, they don't have like a tether that ties you to the rig in case you fall?
Actually, they should have. And that was the difference. Was this was a brand new rig, brand new tower that hadn't been completely outfitted. So we didn't have we had the cables that would tie me to the tubing board so that as I'm working, I wouldn't fall off while I was working.
Yeah.
But to get to that location, there was no safety equipment. So I was free bird at that point.
Yeah.
I could easily fall. And that's what happened. There was a jarring, a crash, and that ejected me up and out.
Catapulted you,
Yeah.
So did they ever determine, I imagine there was some kind of investigation after that. Did they ever determine if the cold weather had anything to do with it, or what exactly was the reason?
Actually, as far as the cold weather was part of what saved my life. And in that situation, it's so cold, I didn't swell up.
Okay.
A lot of us, when we have injuries, whether it's a car accident or a fall or any type of injury, the body swells. And because it was so cold up there, I didn't swell up until after I had gotten to the hospital. And during those initial hours at the hospital, when they're doing surgery and whatnot, they actually turn the temperature down inside the hospital, in the emergency room to keep me cold on purpose.
Yeah.
That way I wouldn't swell up during surgery and cause more complications. So after surgery, they put me in a coma for about not a long time, just a week and a half, intentional coma, so that my body could thaw out slowly without causing problems, from the swelling.
Wow. So
I was very grateful.
were you conscious through, I mean, initially with the accident, were you conscious for most of that?
I was on and off.
Yeah.
So when it first happened, I was knocked unconscious, and within a minute or two, I kind of woke up, and I'm like, "Is everybody okay? Is Ben and Bruce okay?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Where is everybody?"
And you
And they
remember
said-
that? You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
gotcha.
said, and they didn't even think I was alive. They had taken a tarp and put a tarp over me, because I had blood coming from every orifice.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you hit the ground, that's a lot of pressure, and the blood needs someplace to go.
Yeah.
So when they realized that I was alive, they were trying more vigilantly, trying to get the ambulance out there, which, we're talking the Dakotas.
Mm-hmm.
It's out there a ways, and it takes a while for an ambulance just to get there. And then once they found out I was, tossed from an oil rig, to get me to each level of the next hospital that could treat me. So it took about 5.5 hours to finally get me to a hospital that could treat me.
Yeah.
And these days, a lot of people ask, well, why didn't they just fly you? And in 1981, they didn't have helicopters that could fly in the snow, except for military helicopters, in whiteout conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's -30. You can't see your hand in front of your face, much less a helicopter. So they had to transfer me by a regular ambulance, and it took 5.5 hours to get there.
Wow. Before you even started
ambulance
treatment.
actually had tracks instead of tires.
Oh, wow.
It was a snow track ambulance, snowcat ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different animal.
Yeah. And this may sound like a nutty question, but I've just learned just from doing this program that, sometimes your injuries that have left you, at the level, you are, sometimes it happens from the injuries, but sometimes it happens from, surgeries post injury. So your injuries, though, were what caused your paralysis.
Exactly. So, at the impact on the rig, the first thing I broke was both wrists.
Okay.
While I was up on the rig.
Oh,
So
okay.
I broke. It's kind of an odd thing. Usually, when these bones are broken right here, see if I can bring it in there.
Yeah.
There's a couple of scars in there. Basketball players break those. They fall back and they break that
Their
wrist.
Fall. Gotcha.
And when you fall back, you fall to one side or the other. And at first, the doctors were like, "Well, you broke both wrists exactly the same way."
So whatever caused that initial bump that catapulted you, you had your hands on something.
I had my hands in the way.
It broke the wrist.
And it broke both wrists.
Oh, wow.
So, and I smashed my face up on the blocks, which is about the size of a car. And then I was ejected from the rig, and I'm flying through the air. And all I could think was, can we say bad words on here?
You bet. Go for it.
All I could think all the way down was, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Sure.
Only 2 words.
Yeah. Which I'm sure felt like an eternity, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It felt like at the time that it was going in slow motion. And when I finally hit the ground, that's when I broke my right ankle, my left heel, and shattered the vertebrae in my back at L3 and L4. Because I was a pretty big dude, working on the oil rigs.
Yeah.
You get big.
Yeah.
So I weighed I'm 5'10". At the time, I weighed 200 pounds. I have a 57-inch chest with a 31-inch waist.
Man, you were a stud.
I was a big boy. When you work on the oil rigs, you get big real quick.
Absolutely. So, next I'm curious, because, now that I've known you for a little while, and we've talked about this a couple times, and the nature of your post, accident self is, like, and I've only seen you in your chair, but you told me you walk, and
Yes.
right, and fairly well, but and I think maybe for some of our listeners that might be a little surprising, because you
Mhm.
are you characterized as a quad or a paraplegic?
As a paraplegic.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
Incomplete para.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a L3, L4, and for those that don't know, that's belly button level.
Yeah.
So L3, L4, incomplete. So below that belly button level, I still have quadriceps, partial quads, and quadriceps are counted as 4 quads: 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have 1 and 4. I have 2 and 3. Those are the 2 quadriceps in the middle of your upper thigh. And then I have minimal hip flexors, which connects your upper leg to your hip.
Gotcha.
And so between the hip flexors and the quadriceps, I'm able to ambulate pretty well.
Yeah. Okay.
But basically nothing else works.
Yeah. So I imagine you're not going on long walks or anything.
I can. With AFOs, I can walk 10 miles.
Gotcha.
Without AFOs, maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah. Okay.
So I actually, I'm proverbially known as the cheater. Frequently by other people in the SCI game, they're like, it's just not right what you can do.
Yeah. Well, and it's really because it's something that, of course, that we kind of want to do here on Walk and Roll Live is to educate the folks that aren't fluent in our community, and even myself. I mean, I'm learning so much all the time, and is that when you see somebody maybe out somewhere in a chair, and suddenly they stand up to do something, it may look odd to you. So why are they in a chair? Are they a cheater? Right?
Exactly.
But we say it again and again and again on this program that we're all so different, even within the same level of disability.
Exactly. I've learned that this is one of the things that helps me as ambassador, is that I learned very early on that you can take 2 people of exactly the same level of injury. They could both be like myself, L3, L4, incomplete. And one will walk and one will not. Yeah. It all depends. It could be a matter of this person, when they were in their accident, they were thrown to the right. The other person was thrown to the left.
Yeah.
They went over the seat of the car and they ended up in the back seat, during the accident. Someone else went through the windshield. Yeah. They're exactly the same level of injury, but their injuries are quite different.
Well,
and that's very common.
I know you mentioned you ride a motorcycle.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I'll be honest. I have seen gentlemen ride up on a motorcycle, have a handicap placard on their motorcycle, and
yes.
Me, smart ass that I am, I was like, oh man, I wish I had gotten that disability, so I could ride a motorcycle. But you don't know their whole story. So when you see those things, because what's happened to me lately, Luis, and I don't know if this has happened to you. Do you have a handicap placard that you use?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So I imagine that you get some looks,
constantly,
right? Yeah. And I've noticed, and I have nothing to base this in any kind of fact or anything, but I know that there are many times when I drive up, I see people that, able-bodied people that are kind of looking out for our community, and they're eyeballing me and waiting, especially back when I would just hop out of the car on my crutches, and you could just see the change in their face. They're like looking, okay, let's see, this guy looks too young and strapping, Is he really disabled? And when I get out and pull my crutches out, then they're like, you can just see their face change. They wouldn't say anything to me or anything, but I could tell from their demeanor. They're like, okay, I'm checking this dude out. So, yeah. So I'm sure you get some looks.
The funny thing is that I get it from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it from the disability community, but I also get it from the able-bodied community.
Yeah.
So I'll try and make a long story very short. I'm going to the supermarket. This is when I first got out of rehab. I was still wearing a body jacket, underneath my shirt. I still had one of the casts was still on one of my arms, and they had taken off the casts off my legs. I had them on both legs, and I had just gotten AFOs, and I was starting to walk a little bit, and they were telling me walk as much as you can. So, like, if you're going to go to the store and it's a very short distance, see if you can walk, see if you can make it.
Yeah.
So I get out of the car and I go up to the store, and I'm buying like a half gallon of milk and a newspaper. And there's a guy in a wheelchair out in the disabled parking space. There's 6 disabled parking spaces. I took 1 space. The other 5 spaces are empty. The guy didn't even have a car. And the guy's bashing me for walking in. I'm using a forearm crutch. I'm wearing leg braces. But because I can walk, he's getting all over me for parking in the parking space.
So that wasn't enough disability for him. Huh?
Yeah, it wasn't being disabled enough, which I've heard plenty of.
Yeah.
So he says, well, I'm going to call the cops. And I'm like, you go right ahead. I'll wait here. And so he does. And the officer shows up and gets the story from both of us. And then he tells the other guy, you know what? He's disabled enough for me. You get the ticket. So he gave the guy in the wheelchair the ticket for disturbing the peace.
Wow.
Some other kind of charge, something like that, and said, from now on, if you see anybody with a disability, it doesn't matter whether they can walk or not, leave them alone.
Yeah.
And if anything happens to this guy's car, I now have your address.
Come looking for you.
And I will know where you are. So leave people alone.
It's very interesting because I used to be a little bit like that. I will admit, back in my younger days, but
yeah.
But I've been enlightened, and I find now sometimes there is a almost too militant wing, if you will, of our community. That just doesn't use a little common sense, a little grace, a little, whatever it might take, to kind of try to understand.
As a walker, somebody who can ambulate.
Yep.
We constantly are reminding those of us that can't that walkers exist.
Mm-hmm.
People say, well, only people in wheelchairs should be able to park in the accessible parking space. Well, that's reasonably true. However, accessible parking is for a lot more than just people in a wheelchair.
I have to remind people of that all the time. Yeah.
It's for somebody with a pacemaker, somebody with amputation.
Or even if you're ambulatory, so many times it's just much easier. Let me go this route. It's just much easier when you have the handicap spot to get out of the car and be able to let your door swing open. The way I used to get out of the car,
mm-hmm.
I can't do it by holding the door 12 inches open because somebody is parked so close to me, or that's all the room I have. I need that room
exactly.
to swing the door open. So it's not about being in a wheelchair or, having that accessibility. There's other types of accessibility as well. Yeah. And my solution, I mentioned it a couple times here, so if you heard this before, you can kind of fast forward. But one of my proposals is to have maybe half of the handicap spots in the middle of the parking lot. Because the problem is that,
mm-hmm.
especially those people that are committing fraud, poor grandma has passed, and one of their younger offspring or the family members will take the placard and start using it so they can park up front, which I don't understand anyway. You're going to get 10, 20 feet closer to the door so that you can go in and walk all around the store. What's the difference in parking close? But that seems to be the premium, and that's what everybody's after. So eliminate that need to park close and put it in the middle. If I'm in a wheelchair, that extra 25 yards is nothing to me,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's just my proposal. And I don't know if it'll ever happen.
I agree, because there's so many difficulties with people trying to park, go someplace, and find a reasonable accommodation. And people too easy to argue with each other and judge each other. Someone like Eric and I trying to get out of the car, and they're saying, well, you're too young to be disabled. You should be a senior citizen. That's not true. Disability comes in all ages and flavors, and it can be anybody.
Yeah.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Eric?
Yeah.
I got a good saying for those with disability that try to knock other people with disabilities. Before you decide to throw a rock at somebody, maybe they should throw a bunch of rocks at themselves first.
Yeah. Just be a little more reflective, right?
Exactly. And like I tell people as an ambassador is, look, it's not your job to police these things.
Yeah.
It's the job of the police. Let the police officer make that determination, because that's their job. They're trained to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So let them do that. If you see something that is suspect that you're unsure of, call the local police department. Have their number in your speed dial. Call and report it. Absolutely report it.
Yeah.
But don't go and do something about it. You're not the police. You're not a vigilante. You can get your head busted.
Yeah.
There are people that will, even though you're in a wheelchair, they will swing on you because they think that you're getting into their business. Stay away from that. Avoid it.
Yeah.
Let people be. But report, and let the officer make the determination.
Yeah, a good point. And I think on top of that, you just don't know. You just don't know what that person is going through. You mentioned a pacemaker, and that's just one of probably hundreds of things that you're still able to walk, but you still need, to have that placard in that spot.
Exactly. And like I try and teach people, call it accessible parking. I'm real big into saying the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people, don't use handicap for one, and we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Not a good word to use. It's accessible parking, not disabled parking, not handicap parking, not whatever. Just call it accessible parking. You don't have to say wheelchair accessible, just accessible.
Yeah.
And that's good enough.
Absolutely.
Keep it simple, keep it easy. Because it might be your grandma, who has a hip problem,
mm-hmm.
Or grandpa's got a pacemaker, or somebody else has a wheelchair, or, a veteran who's an amputee.
Yeah.
You never know.
Or has chronic pain.
And it's not your place to ask.
Even chronic pain from a military injury. You just don't know. So let's circle back. Post injury, what was your life like after that? Getting back into your life.
I did rehab.
Mm-hmm.
A few months after my injury, I was sent to Rancho Los Amigos in Downey, California.
So back to California. Okay.
Yeah. But actually, shortly after my injury, when I told you I went into a coma and
mm-hmm.
for about a week and a half. And when I came out of the coma, my family was there in North Dakota. and they asked the doctors, okay, what are you going to do with them? What's the next step in this? And they said, well, we're going to send them to rehab in another state because we don't have rehab in this state. So we'll send them to Minneapolis, Chicago, like Shirley Ryan, Ability Lab, Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado, which was their main contract. A lot of smaller states will contract with a larger state that has rehabilitation services.
Okay.
So that was the plan. And my family was like, we don't have any family in any of those three areas. He'd be there totally by himself. And the one doctor said, well, where are you from? And they said, well, we're from Los Angeles. And the doctor's eyes lit up and got all big. And he was like, oh my God, that's where Rancho Los Amigos is. There's also another place called Casa Colina.
Yeah.
How far do you live from those places? And my mom says, well, we live about 35 miles from Rancho, and we live about 10, 12 miles from Casa Colina. And they said, we're sending you home.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was great. They stuck me and my mom on a little tiny airplane, which flew us to Salt Lake City. We didn't fly over the Rockies because it wasn't that big an airplane, and the airplane had to be cut, to fit a gurney inside the airplane. So they can't repressurize an airplane that's of that type, medical transport. So it has to fly through the the Rocky Mountains. We get to Salt Lake City, which the pilots had never been further than Salt Lake City, and they're looking for maps. This is before GPS existed.
Yeah.
And so they didn't know how to fly to California. So we told them, do you know where Interstate 15 is here in Salt Lake City? They said, yeah, it's 2 miles that way. Find Interstate 15 and go south until we tell you. So we flew over St. George and Las Vegas and Needles and Barstow and
getting close.
finally get to San Bernardino, which we also had to fly through Cajon Pass because we couldn't fly over it. We get to San Bernardino and it's okay, boys, hang a right. And they just 5 minutes. We're over Ontario Airport, and we tell them we're supposed to be there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which was fun.
So probably an easy question to answer. Usually at this point, especially with somebody with an injury from that time period, how was the level of care and rehab and all that? But man, especially for the day, you were at the gold standard.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what the doctor up in North Dakota was saying, was that you couldn't, at that time, Rancho Los Amigos was the place to be.
Yeah. So
I had doctors who are no longer around, but their names are on the buildings.
Yeah.
So like Dr. Perry. Dr. Perry's name is on the building there at Rancho Los Amigos. The urologist,
a woman,
the wing is named after him.
Isn't there a woman that was from Rancho Los Amigos that really is kind of credited with starting the physical therapy treatment, right?
Dr. Jacqueline Perry.
Yes, there you go. I think I saw a documentary. She really had to fight for that.
Yeah.
All the scientists at the time were like, it's all almost like Galileo coming to, the powers that be back in there. She
kind of was like Galileo. I mean, she was an incredible doctor. She, prior to World War II, she was a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And then she served in the service. She was an Army nurse during World War II. She got out of the service and became a physical therapist. And then she went on to become a doctor. And at some point, she had become a physician. somebody who helps long term with disabling conditions.
Yeah.
And she was also a kinesiologist. And Jacqueline Perry had become the director for Rancho Los Amigos National Rehabilitation Center. And she was, I got to see her in her last year of life. In her last year, she was 93 years old, and she was still going to Rancho Los Amigos one day a week,
Wow.
to make sure that the nurses and the therapists were still doing what she taught them to do years and years ago, how to take care of patients, how to diagnose conditions, and all this other stuff. And they had a big birthday celebration for her, and then she died 6 months later. And she was 93 years old and just amazing. And if people that don't know about Dr. Jacqueline Perry, she is probably the doctor that made the biggest changes for people with spinal cord injuries, CP, polio. Big doctor in the polio world.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Well, that's what Rancho Los Amigos started as, was a polio treatment center. And then after, we beat polio, then, instead of just closing that place down, it's like, okay, we need to find a new purpose. And of course, they've lived all these years.
Tuberculosis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if none of us are old enough to remember this, but 100 years ago, there was a terrible tuberculosis epidemic around the world. And at that time, Rancho Los Amigos was one of the leading research centers on tuberculosis. For people that don't know about Rancho Los Amigos, people are always concerned, well, which is the best rehab? Which is this and which is that? They don't understand. Rancho is the oldest.
Yeah.
Rancho was a rehab hospital when cowboys and Indians were still fighting over gold during the gold rush. Okay.
That gives you an idea, right?
Yeah. Back in the day, Rancho Los Amigos was the hospital that somebody would fall off a stagecoach. They would fall off their horse and end up with a spinal cord injury, an amputation, or have some kind of disease that we can fix now with an antibiotic.
Yeah.
But back then we couldn't do anything with. Back then, they'd send them to Rancho Los Amigos.
So you were fortunate. So then after you graduated, let's say, from Rancho, and then I'm sure you go back, but then you weren't going to be on the oil rigs anymore.
No.
So what did that look like?
So after rehabilitation, I started to look into work and education programs. While I was still inpatient at Rancho, I was inpatient for 2 years, which is obviously much different than nowadays. Back then, you could be inpatient for quite a while.
Yeah.
So I did 2 years inpatient, 1 year of outpatient.
So when you say 2 years inpatient, were you a resident there, or was that off site?
I was a resident patient
there
for 2 years.
Wow.
So Rancho would actually take me and a bunch of other patients and put us on a wheelchair accessible school bus and drive us to Cerritos College over in Cerritos. Where we just had the Angel City games recently.
Absolutely, yes.
They had a orthotics and prosthetics technicians program at Cerritos College, and I went to take that class. Because there was so much difficulty in making braces for myself, AFOs, that I thought I should learn about this, see what it takes to make braces. And there was myself and a gal there who was an amputee. We were the two disabled people within the orthotics and prosthetics program. which they didn't want us there. At least the professor that taught the class did not want us in the program. It's like disabled people should not be providing orthotics and prosthetics for people with their own disabilities.
It seems like to me, it would be the
way.
exact people you would want to be, but
yeah,
call me crazy.
Well, that mindset, this is back in 1980, 81.
Yeah.
That mindset has changed.
Yeah.
But a lot of people today don't think that's possible. As far back as 40 years ago, people with disabilities didn't take care of other people with disabilities.
No.
That's
changed. Why, as I'm listening to your story, I'm a little bit surprised that the level of care that you got, but the sensitivity too. We've heard enough stories on this program where, people have gotten zero. One of our guests had somebody come into in a wheelchair to their hospital room who they don't even know who that is now. Came by, they don't know how they came to them, what program they were with, who organization they were with, just came by and talked to them and chatted with them for 20, 30 minutes, left. But it changed their lives just in that 20 or 30 minutes, got a whole new mindset for what was possible, but never saw them again, never got any other kind of real care in that way.
Yeah.
To where, and that was probably no more than 20 years ago. And here I hear you're talking about 40 years and you got that level. So it was available, but still there was those insensitivities on the part of a professor.
To be quite honest with you, a lot of it had to do with the job that I had. So one, the workers' compensation was from an entirely different state.
Yeah.
Two, and a lot of people don't realize this, but your level of care is often related to if you had a job, was your job industry related?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Was it military related? And we frequently give better care to those that were injured at work or in the military. Yeah, and it's sad to say, and I've seen this quite a bit, because I also go to the VA hospitals and whatnot. People that were injured in the field of war, if their injury is war related, they were in the theater of war, they get much different care than the guy that was driving truck on a base in Texas.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
If you were home here in the States working the base and you were an Army truck driver and there was an accident, your care is much different than the guy that was shot in Afghanistan or, some other theater of war. And it's just the way the system works, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You think that we should all get the same level of care when in reality we don't.
Well, I personally, I feel like all of that, whether you're in a support of that fellow that's in the theater of battle,
yes,
all of everything he has is part of a big system to deliver that to him at that place, whether it be ammunition or food or shelter or clothing or whatever. There's an incredible machine that's put together to get all that to him, under those circumstances, which is very dangerous. And so whether you're back in Texas, part of that whole thing, I think you deserve all of that care. And a lot of it is not only level, but duration.
Yeah.
Right.
I believe that everybody should get the same level of care because it's needed.
Yeah.
And I believe that our service members should get everything that is available.
Yeah.
All the best equipment, all the other stuff. But I also believe that other people should get that too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel fortunate that I had workers' comp that provided me with everything. If I was California workers' comp, I would not have gotten the level of care that I did.
Yeah.
If I was in certain other states, it wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful to the care and the provision of equipment and services that I needed to get me back, as best as that I could be.
Yeah. So let's follow the career path. What career did you pursue?
So coming out of rehab at that time, I had looked at going back to oil services. I had looked at, different types of jobs, working in something that would provide me with the kind of money that I was making on the oil rigs. And after looking at it and going to a few oil companies like 76, Unocal, and a couple of different places, they were very warm and friendly and said that you would need additional education and whatnot. Basically, I decided to go another route. IT, information technology, was brand new, at least on the level that it had become at that time. We're talking the early 80s, and IBM PCs were brand new. They had CPM machines and Ataris and Commodores and Apples and mainframes and minis and all that stuff. And I had become involved in that because while I was in rehabilitation, I was bored. I needed a way to occupy my time. So I started learning computer programming just as a lark.
Yeah.
So I became an IT professional. Long story short, I was selling things like Lotus 1-2-3 and WordPerfect and stuff like that to defense contractors. And, here in California, we have a lot of aerospace companies, and they were buying computers and software and stuff like that. And I was selling this stuff.
Yeah.
So I went that route. I became an IT person, and I did IT pretty much the balance of my career. So I was an IT person. I became a level 3 break fix and security specialist. So essentially what that means is when you have a problem with your computer, you call the help desk, and they try and help you out. And if it doesn't work, they escalate the call to second level, who may be on the telephone, or they might come to your location and fix your computer. If second level can't fix it, they call me. And I'm the guy that comes out and looks at your equipment and say,
Time for new equipment.
Just get new equipment.
Yeah,
this thing is a piece of trash. It's too old. The parts are going to cost more than the computer is worth.
Yeah.
Just replace the whole thing.
Yeah.
Save money, replace the whole thing.
So how about let's turn to the personal side, because those are the things that I think when people get injured, they think all of that is over. So, we like to let people know that there is a personal life post-injury.
Yes. So this is going to sound really bad. I married one of my nurses. So one of my nurses at one of the regular hospitals, we had met, hit it off really well, and she followed me to Rancho Los Amigos, which she tried to hide that from Rancho Los Amigos and not tell anybody she was a nurse, but they knew. They can tell, especially when she shows up. She would change out of her nursing uniform, show up at Rancho Los Amigos, and she forgot to change her nursing shoes.
That was the tell.
Yeah, they knew she was a nurse from another hospital. So anyways, we got married about was that 1982, about a year and a half after my accident. We got married. Like a lot of spinal cord injuries, they did not know whether I could have children or not. So at Rancho Los Amigos, there was a doctor there, Dr. Komar, Eston Komar. He was a urologist, but he was also the specialist for helping people have kids. And he said, when you're ready, let me know. He says, we don't know whether you'll have kids or not, but when you're ready, you and your wife come back, we'll talk. So a few years later, went back and talked, and he says, well, I'm going to run some tests on you, and based on the results of those tests, I'll send you to another doctor. But the results will determine which doctor I send you to. So then he sent me to the Women's Hospital here in Los Angeles over by Cal State LA. And they did some tests, did some other things, sent me to Good Samaritan Hospital, which is downtown Los Angeles. And down at Good Samaritan, they said, we've got this new technique. And basically what's happening is your sperm is going the other way. Instead of coming out the way it should, it goes back because of your paralysis. The sphincters are not opening and closing. So they said, we have a medication that we can try, and it will make the sphincters work opposite than how they're working now, which will be closer to the way they should operate in the first place. Long story short, it worked. And I had 2 kids.
Very good.
So my first son, he's now 38 years old. My second son is 36 years old, and they're both nurses.
Ah.
Just like their mom. So my one son is he works the emergency room at the hospital that I met my ex-wife. And my other son lives with his wife up in Boise, Idaho, working for the VA hospital. And both of them have kids. So as of almost a year ago, I'm a grandpa.
Grandpa. Very nice. It's the best, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And back 40 years ago, they couldn't tell me whether I would have kids or not.
Yeah.
And now here, 44 years later, to be a grandpa, I'm beside myself.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I can't let you go before we find out a little bit about your involvement with Triumph, how that started, how long you've been doing that, because I think you're one of the OGs, right?
Yeah, I'm one of the old guys.
Yeah.
So Triumph has been around about 16 years, and I've been with Triumph for about 14. So, I'm a pretty independent guy. I had dropped out of the disability, being a walker.
Mm-hmm.
Disability community used to be much different than it is now. So disabilities would not hang out with each other back in the day. So if you were a spinal cord injury, you didn't like people with polio, and polio people didn't like you, and MS didn't like MD, and AMPS and blind people would, go at each other even though they couldn't communicate. It's just one thing or another. People would they weren't nice to each other back then. So I left the community. To me, it was too much drama, too much BS. And then a few years ago, about 15, 16 years ago, I felt like it'd been long enough. I was getting closer to retirement. I should get back into the disability community, because I was hearing rumblings that the disabled community had changed. They were becoming more inclusive and more understanding of different types of disabilities. So there was a disabled sporting event out here at Cal State San Bernardino.
Yeah.
And Triumph had happened to be there. And
Who's that with Dr. Aaron Moffat, right?
Aaron Moffat, exactly.
Yeah.
Good guy.
Yeah.
I think right now he's working with the VA hospital.
He out of state, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
He moved to another state to work with one of the VA hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to this event, and Triumph Foundation was there, and I met Andrew Skinner and Kirsten Skinner, and Andrew looks at me and he says, "I don't know you. I've never seen you. I've never heard of you. Don't know anything about you. And I know everybody in Southern California.
Yeah.
You know, tell me your story. You know, give me the short version." And so I talked to him, told him what I did, and you know, my level and all that, and he was just dumbfounded by my level of injury and what I was able to do. And he was like, "This is incredible. We need someone like you as an ambassador, because you cross that line between able-bodied and disabled. Most of us are disabled. You live in both worlds, which is a different animal, you know, than for most of us." And that's how I got started with Triumph, you know, becoming an ambassador, started meeting patients, going to hospitals, participating in events and whatnot. And now I've been with Triumph long enough that I train other people, become responsible for different things. I travel for Triumph. You know, something's going on up in Northern California, I jump in the car and go, you know, because I'm able to do that.
Yeah.
It's not a problem for me to go and do things where somebody else might have to make more planning to be able to go and do it.
Gotcha. So more on a moment's notice, you can go if that's what it warrants, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, I'm accustomed to travel.
Yeah.
You know, as an IT person, I used to travel all over the country.
Gotcha.
You know,
I was just going to say, we talked to Andrew a few weeks ago, and that was one of the things that I asked him, you know, because they kind of came into my orbit, you know, once I started doing this show, really. I mean, I kind of heard of them, you know, but I just started hearing about them more and more and more, and wanted to have Andrew on, and I asked him about that, you know, whether it's a national organization, because I kind of got that sense, and he said, no, we're more Southern California, but through COVID, you know, they were still providing services when nobody else was, so it kind of thrust them a little bit more on that national stage.
And that's true. It's been kind of demand through COVID, and especially for states that do not have programs like Triumph. Yeah. So Triumph is a very unique program, even nationally or worldwide, that we provide all the services that we do.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not just peer mentoring, support groups, things like that, inpatient, but also outpatient. Yeah. And then, of course, we have our grant programs, you know, for like ramps and hand controls and whatnot.
Yeah. And
then we have the sporting programs.
Right. Social type things as well.
Social things.
Yeah.
We also put on our own events. So like people hear of Angel City Games, you know, we do the same similar events.
Yeah.
So we put on a spring festival and a fall festival, but then we help everybody else, like Angel City Games and other organizations, put on their events as well. You know, a lot of end users, you know, the people we support don't think about these things, but like no one organization can have every type of adaptive equipment available for every situation. So like in Triumph Foundation, we have a lot of hand cycles and a lot of rugby chairs, and we keep them in storage. You know, when somebody needs something, they call us up and say, you know, UCLA will call us up and say, hey, we're having a rugby event, and like, okay, when do you need them? We'll bring them down. You need hand cycles. Somebody else, Angels City Games will call. Amputee organization, AMP for Life, will call us and say, hey, we need this or we need that.
Yeah.
If we need equipment, like we have rugby chairs, but we don't have basketball chairs. We call UCLA, and UCLA brings the basketball chairs out. Somebody else will bring something else out. That's the great thing about the disability adaptive program community in Southern California specifically, is that we all share. We share resources, we share equipment, we share people. It's anybody can call us at any time and say, I've got this program going on. We need people, and we need 20 types of this type of chair.
Help.
And we can do that.
Yeah. So, for myself, I never really was a part of the disabled community up until about probably the time frame that you said. And not that I was staying away. I was just busy with life and wasn't really involved with that community too much. And so through possibilities, and when I was at the radio station, they were doing their triathlons, and because I'm disabled, they kind of thought, well, maybe we could have you come to the event and do the triathlon. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they trained me for a whole 4 weeks, to do a triathlon. And so that's kind of how I got involved. And then I've just really done a deep dive and been immersed in it ever since, and to the point now where I'm doing this program. So as we, in all these events and all these organizations I'm learning about, Triumph and Angel City Sports, and it goes on, and they're awesome. And I'm finding that different municipalities are now starting to do their own, sporting events, and they're reaching out to organizations like that, like you say, to get the equipment and get the expertise. We went to one at Rancho Cucamonga here just a few weeks ago, in relation to like what Triumph puts on, and in Angel City Sports, it was kind of a little boutique kind of sized, but it's great that they're putting that on through their rec department.
Exactly. There used to be a show out in San Bernardino. It was part of Cal State San Bernardino and Loma Linda, and they used to have it at the Orange Show, which for those people living outside the area, it's kind of like a
fairgrounds, yeah,
type of location. And they used to have a disabled show similar to Abilities Expo, but slightly different, smaller scale, more localized. And
what time frame was that? What years was that?
Oh, that was a few years ago, pre-COVID and beyond.
I never had heard of that.
So it was a program that used to go on, and then since COVID, it kind of died off.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things, it didn't quite make it through COVID. But the remnants of it now exist, and you may have heard of this. There's the disability program that goes on at Ontario Convention Center.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We went to that, Eric and I.
That's
where I met the guys. Show. That's where I met your colleagues from Live to Roll.
Yes.
And got involved with you guys. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. We saw you there.
Yeah.
So for those people that don't know, Southern California and Los Angeles, it's a huge area.
Yeah.
People just have no idea how big this area is. And there's different convention centers and different event halls and places to do things. So we're very fortunate here. Yeah. And our disability community here is mind-boggling huge.
Yeah. Very robust. Yeah. You can't go to other states or even other parts of this state and find it as robust. Yeah, but absolutely.
There's very few places that have a number of disability related programs especially sporting and activity programs.
Yeah.
And we're very fortunate here in Southern California that we have the variety and the depth of availability to programs and services that we do. It's other places have no idea what's available here. And what people don't know is that even though they talk about, people are leaving California in droves, they're moving out. Not in the disability community.
Never thought of that.
In the disability community, if you want to live someplace where there is programs,
services,
supporting activities, all this other stuff, people in the disability community are moving to California.
Gotcha.
Because we have so much to offer here.
Well, we could go on for, hours probably talking about this. Try to keep the program to about an hour. So I'm going to wind down here, but I want to kind of leave you the final word and just maybe any advice or, anything through your experiences that you would like to share with our listeners. And whether that be if they're a part of the disabled community, know somebody, a loved one is in the disability community, or if they're just listening to this program and we can kind of give them a little knowledge.
Yeah, I would love to tell anybody who's out there, get out, get off the bed, get out of the house. Don't sit there at home waiting for things to happen, because it's not.
Yeah,
you can tell by Eric's face there. They ain't happening at home. It's not there.
He's an active guy, him and his walking stick, right,
yes.
Eric? Yes.
So you have to get out and do things. The more you get out of the house, the better. There are programs that not only do they need your participation, they need your assistance.
Mm-hmm.
If you can help out a program, not just participate in it, but actually volunteer in it. Volunteer in it. Things are difficult for disabled people finding jobs and doing this and that. In some ways it's better than it was, some ways it's not.
Yeah.
So you have to make adjustments. And if there's something that we can do to volunteer as, giving back, find a way to do it. It's worthwhile. It's good for your soul. It's good for you. It's good for your community.
Yeah.
Do something that helps other people. And if helping other people means helping those of us with disabilities, all the better. If there's something else that you're connected with in some way, whether it's veterans or you work with kids or you work with dog walkers that were injured in the park, got eaten by another dog, join that.
Yeah.
Get involved some way, somehow. It's important.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Luis Outomuro. Thank you for coming on Walk and Roll Live.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I love being here. Walk and Roll Live is great.
Walk and Roll Live.
Tuned in to Walk and Roll Live podcast. Such a refreshing perspective on life and disability. Love it.
Every episode brings a new story that's both inspiring and eye-opening. Can't get enough.
The hosts make you feel like you're part of a genuine conversation. Walk and Roll Live is my weekly dose of positivity.
Walk and Roll Live is a game changer. It's not just about disabilities. It's about embracing life's challenges with a smile. Highly recommend.
My go-to podcast for real, unfiltered conversations. It's like having a cup of coffee with friends who share incredible stories.
Walk and Roll Live.
Welcome to Walk and Roll Live with Doug Vincent and Eric Agua and Mr. Happy for your life and the Super.
Hey guys, welcome back to Walk and Roll Live. I'm Eric, along with my buddy Doug.
All righty. Hey, a great interview, right?
Oh yeah.
Luis has a lot to say we could probably make either like 3 or 4 shows with him, or just let him go for 3 or 4 hours. But it's always good stuff. That's the nice thing. So
I would definitely love to hear more about the oil rig business, because the oil rig business he was talking about was one of my favorite parts of the story. And there was a lot about the oil rigs I never knew before.
Yeah. Oh, and, obviously a dangerous, dangerous job. And his story just, really proves that, right? Yeah, but we'll probably have him back on again. I think we talked a little bit after we wrapped up our interview. Somebody that, he does segments and also full shows with the Live to Roll crowd that we've had on here a few times. He's on a show, Rolling Over the Hill, aging into disability. And so talks about, like Pete was saying at the beginning of the show, looking for more insight into his disability. Well, maybe if you've had a disability for years and years and years, that things change as you get older, like things change with anybody as they age. And so some of the things that you were experiencing and have experienced over the years with your disability are changing with your aging. And they have some ideas about that. They have guests on that will talk about those things, what kinds of services are available and products that are available to help you with some of those issues that you might face. So Luis does that as well. So we'll probably have him back on if we tackle any of those topics right here. So speaking of topics, if you're looking for resources pertaining to your disability, we have those on our resource page. I've added a few more here recently. Again, walkandrolllive.com. Also is where you can find the video on the WC Motocross regional qualifier that we witnessed this last weekend. There's a short video up there, like 3.5 minutes, but it'll definitely give you the flavor. If you don't find the resources that you're looking for, will let us know and we'll try to track them down for you. And I get emails all the time, so there's going to be some new ones coming up that I haven't gotten up there yet. Next week, we have a wonderful story of a young girl with the rare syndrome, Rett syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of that. Her father, A.J. Tessler, is a filmmaker, and he created a series called Magnolia's Guide to Adventuring. Magnolia, who he calls Maggie, is his daughter. And so we'll get a little insight into what that syndrome is all about the films. It's a series of short films. So we'll talk all about that to her father and learn about the series and learn more about the syndrome with Dr. Carrie Fu, who is a neurologist, I believe. So we'll have that on next week. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Doug Vincent, with Eric Aguilar from the Aguilar Professional Training Studio. This has been Walk and Roll Live. Disability Stories, Life Limitless.
Walk and roll live. Life's the best. Walk and roll live. Life limitless. The struggle's real. Gotta keep it tight. Disabled, but defined by the fight. We're unstoppable, breaking through the walls and the limitations into standing tall. The world may try to bring us down, but we rise up, rocking with the ground. We're warriors, fearless in our stride. Together we stand, side by side, no boundaries. We're living life our way, we're breaking barriers every single day. With every step, we're breaking the mold, shining bright, the story yet untold.